World War I, the Great War, the war to end all wars. This global war that ignited across Europe brought many changes that launched these countries into the modern age. Changes that helped propel the world into this new age of warfare were the invention of the machine gun, the tank, and chemical warfare. World War I was the first time chemical weapons were introduced to the world in a large scale, and it quickly began to develop into a devastating psychological and physical weapon. Fritz Haber was a German scientist responsible for the idea of using chlorine gas as a weapon, and was the weapon's main advocate. The first documented gas attack took place on April 22, 1915. It involved the use of chlorine gas, which Haber had been developing for the use against the Allied forces. This first large-scale use of the chemical weapon on that day in 1915 ignited a chemical arms race among the nations participating in the war. By the end of World War I, scientists working for both sides had experimented with some 3,000 chemicals for the use of possible weapons. Around 50 of these poisonous gases were actually tried out on the battlefield. Haber and his scientific team had chosen chlorine gas for a few reasons. It was extremely available because of its large-scale uses in the German dye industry. The gas was also inexpensive to produce and did not divert any necessary resources from the production of weapons needed for the war. Chlorine gas was heavier than the surrounding air, which would allow it to sink into the trenches instead of disappearing into the sky. But most importantly, the gas was a powerful irritant to the eyes, nose, lungs, and throat. At high enough concentrations, exposed victims would die of asphyxiation.
See you afterwards, Bernard.
Yes, Alain.
Broken! Andy! Give me your mask! Give me your mask!
The effects did not become apparent for up to 12 hours, but then it began to rot the body, within and without. The skin blistered, the eyes became extremely painful, and nausea and vomiting began. Worse, the gas attacked the bronchial tubes, stripping off the mucous membrane. The pain was almost beyond endurance, and in most cases, victims had to be strapped to their beds.
Mustard gas was the cause of the largest portion of chemical weapon casualties in World War I. Victims were often temporarily and sometimes permanently blind, and they took weeks, sometimes months to recover, which eventually began to overcrowd frontline medical facilities. When the poison killed, death would take up to 4 to 5 weeks. The effects of mustard gas would be persistent for weeks in the environment. Troops could be marching through contaminated areas, unaware that they were being exposed to this harmful gas. After returning to their trenches or barracks, they could contaminate other soldiers, many hours after their own blistering and blindness began. The terrors of chemical warfare were more than the lives of soldiers that these poison gases took. The most dangerous part of chemical warfare was the sheer panic that the soldiers faced when being exposed. The psychological fear it caused haunted the world for several years until chemical warfare was banned after World War I.